What's up, guys? The Wannabe Racer here once again, and today I'm bringing you part one of my interview with Andrew from Stac. If you didn't already know, Stac is a small Canadian technology company and the inventors of the first silent indoor trainer, the Stac Zero. In this part of the interview, we talk about their latest product, the Stac Zero Variable Resistance, which brings smart training technology to their innovative platform. So sit back, grab some popcorn, and enjoy the chat. I figured, spend a bit of time talking about the trainer. I know you guys got the new VR out now, or just about coming out, and then can kind of talk about the wind tunnel stuff after that, I guess.
Sure. So the VR trainer to start things off, that's something we've been working quite hard on lately, and we've made a lot of progress in terms of getting something that's nice and smooth and rideable. We got the I'll call it the 80% prototype done for Interbike last year.
Yep.
And since then, it's been a lot of changes, well, minor tweaks mechanically. So trying to figure out how do we improve reliability? How do we make it a robust design? How do we make it manufacturable? And that's on the mechanical side, which is where I'm well versed. The software side, which I have a cursory overview, but I do not get in the nuts and bolts of that, so to speak. So our programmer's been doing a ton of work trying to make the actual programming work quite well. So we've done a lot of development on that, trying to simplify the design, make it so it's reliable, it does what you want when you want it to, and it doesn't have any unexpected performances. And that's something that we've just been going over it and polishing, and there's been a lot of riding in the office, a lot of sweat on our floor.
Yep.
But it's been a very rewarding process. So it's seeing where it started off and where it is now. It's the amount of refinement that we've added to it is pretty substantial. So it's one of those things that you don't really anticipate until you get into the development process, how much polish goes into a control system for a VR trainer. You just think, okay, it says, hit this wattage and then off you go. But with any control system, you have to be very careful about how it reacts. So if you react too quickly or too slowly, people are going to be upset. And we had a system that worked quite well, but it was just a little slow. And we actually went back to the drawing board, or Art specifically wanted to go, Art's our programmer, he wanted to go back to the drawing board because he said, okay, if I was riding this and I'm doing a short interval, so say I'm doing a 10-second interval and my target is to hit 600 watts for 10 seconds. Every time you do that, because of the lag in the control system, it would end up being maybe 10 watts or 20 watts or whatever low, just because that initial adjustment takes some finite time.
Yeah.
So he said, I don't want this to happen. How can I avoid it? So he spent a ton of time working on this control system so that you get not quite instantaneous change, because that feels like hitting a brick wall, but a very quick change that is something that as a rider, when you know it's coming, you can kind of prepare for it a little bit, but it's something that it's a quick enough change that you will hit those targets for your intervals. So if you're setting your outline for your intervals, you can know you'll hit it within a few percent if you're using Trainer Road or another training app like that. So that's been a lot of our software development. But one of the really cool things, and this is again Art's brainchild, is the ability to upload workouts to the trainer. So you can now store something directly on the trainer, and when you start riding, if there's nothing else connected to it, it will execute that ride. So if you don't have a training software or something connected to it, and you want to execute a very specific warm-up before a race, then you can just pre-program that, just start riding at your race. You don't have to worry about having your phone or anything else out, and you will go through that warm-up procedure, and it will hold you to the watt and to the second, provided you keep the pedals going. And That's a pretty unique feature. I don't know if anyone else offers that right now. So it's something that Art was really adamant about, and it's working quite well right now. We can upload any specific erg file, which is just a given format. But one of the other cool things is you can actually take a previous workout, and I think you can export from Training Peaks. So if you have a power file from a previous workout that went well, you can export that as an erg file format and upload that exact file to your trainer, and it will now replicate that exact ride. So it's kind of neat how it does that. And we think that it's probably one of those cases where maybe 5% of the users will ever use it, but for those 5%, it's going to be an extremely useful feature. So that's some of the interesting development work we've been putting into it. On the other side of things, we've had some tweets go out about this just in the last couple days. But again, Art has been busy with developing essentially our own software that's just the ability to create a workout, so an easy workout creator kind of. But on top of that, he's got this neat idea where you can take a Strava segment and you plot out on Google Maps, so either using Google Maps or Google Street View, but you can replicate that ride with the Smart Trainer as well. So you can actually go through and look at all the different Street View images as you're going through the ride. So, for example, I was on vacation last week in the Azores, and there's a lot of steep hills there, and we looked up some Strava segments, and he rode one of those Strava segments, and it was a road I had driven on, and it was really cool to see that kind of not in real life, but replicated through the trainer. So yeah, that's where things are kind of sitting right now with the Smart Trainer. It's quite a busy time for us. We're just getting through the final orders of the production parts.
Yeah.
And the logistics and just making sure everything arrives on time and hitting all our production targets. It's always a challenging experience, but our manufacturing guy has been right on top of it, and we're executing much better than we did on the initial Kickstarter. So that's also a bonus. We had lots of lessons learned during the Kickstarter, and it was, for me anyway, it was the first time really doing a large manufacturing project like that. But taking what we've learned, we are very confident about hitting all the deadlines. Kickstarter was it was a rush to make the deadlines. But this, we've got an extra month or two built in just for testing and for assembly and just any production validation issues that we may come up with. So, so that's where things are sitting there. So,
so I guess going back to that whole handy warm-up feature you mentioned there, does the trainer require a power source then, or?
No, it's completely battery powered. So sorry, I forgot to mention that actually the first time around. My cat is walking in front of me. So the trainer is completely battery powered, and right now we've got the prototypes are running off 18650 cells, so it's just a specific type of lithium-ion battery cell. It happens to be the same one that's used in the Tesla Model S. So we use one of them instead of 4,000, but we're actually downsizing it slightly for the production version to a cell that's half as long. But in testing, we've been able to do up to 20 or 25 hours of riding on a single battery charge. And then the smaller battery, it's going to be half the capacity, but we still will get at least a 10 to 12 hour ride time. So really, if you need more than that off a single ride, then you've got pretty demanding circumstances. And what you can do is just, if you really, really need that extra capacity, you can get a power bank or something, one of the little USB chargeable power banks, and you can just plug it in because it's a micro USB connection. So for normal usage, you could leave it, say, plugged into your computer, which there's no data transfer that happens there, but it just gives you a small power source, and it doesn't need much electricity to actually run.
Okay. Now, I've always been kind of curious on the science for the Zero there. I know it kind of works on magnets, but isn't an aluminum wheel not magnetic?
Yep. So this is a very common question that we get, and it's a little counterintuitive because aluminum is non-magnetic, but the best way to think of the wheel, or the actual way the resistance is created, is a short-circuited generator. So we're spinning a conductor through a magnetic field, and what that actually does is induce an electrical current in the piece of metal that's spinning through. So in this case, the bike rim. That electrical current generates its own magnetic field, which opposes the one in the magnets. And that is what actually slows down the wheel, is this counter-magnetic field. And the byproduct of that is there's a little bit of heat dissipation all of the energy gets dissipated into the wheel. So that means as you ride, it actually starts to heat up. But it's really, really surprising how effective this is. So with the Smart Trainer, when the magnets are basically touching the wheel, or even with the regular trainer, when they're basically touching the wheel, and for example, if you're in your fastest gear, you can stand up on the pedals, and even though it's not the friction that's holding it back, the magnetic force is so substantial that you can barely turn over the pedals. Like it's incredible just how much force actually is generated for something that has no physical contact. So magnetism is pretty cool. It's neat how it works. And it's a very strong force. So it's been used on a lot of braking systems for industrial vehicles and things like that, just because it's a good system that doesn't have any moving parts, doesn't wear anything down. So so that's the general science of how it works. And when you look at the construction of the wheel, so the more aluminum there is, the more resistance. So in a lot of cases, cheaper wheels are actually better for resistance because they don't go through the same steps of weight reduction that some of the more expensive, like for example, an Ultegra or Dura-Ace wheel that has lighter aluminum walls, that would actually be slightly worse compared to a cheap wheel that if it's a big hunk of aluminum, then it's going to work really, really well for the trainer.
And where did the idea then for the Zero come from?
So it was, I love telling this story because it's very random, but it was actually at Canada's Wonderland. So sitting next to the drop zone ride, or drop tower, or whatever it's called now because of the trademark stuff. But that's the same kind of braking system they use there. So they're bringing the carriages down from, 100 kilometers an hour or so, and they bring them essentially to a stop in 30 or 40 feet. And they do that completely with eddy current braking. So I had known this, but I'd never really thought too much about it. And I was sitting there watching it one day thinking, I wonder if you can apply this to something else. And that's really how it came about. It was just I wonder if moment. And then I got thinking about bike brakes because I was just getting into triathlon at that point. And then initially the concept was, well, if it's strong enough, can we actually make bike brakes that are more aerodynamic and out of the way? But it wasn't strong enough for that. However, it worked really well for dissipating enough energy for a trainer. And essentially what a trainer does is just dissipates energy. It's just a way of wasting energy. So it's like I said before, it's a very inefficient generator.
What's I gonna say? Yeah, definitely can appreciate the zero noise feature there as someone who lives in an apartment with people above and below. So
yeah, and we get lots of customers in your situation where especially places like New York City, we've been really popular there so far because there's tight living quarters. There's one guy I've actually become friends with who's his girlfriend said, like, he's an avid cyclist, but his girlfriend said, okay, if you buy a trainer, I shouldn't be able to see it all the time. So it had to be something that was very quiet and could get tucked under the couch and out of the way. So that's what brought him to us, and then he's become a huge fan of it, and we just got chatting, and so he's been a big supporter of ours and telling his friends about us. And And as it ends up, like, New York is the perfect place because space is at a premium, and you don't want to hear your neighbors too much. So in that situation and in your situation, that's fantastic to have the low noise.
Yeah.
And we were joking about it when we kind of started marketing this, but saying, like, you can train next to your sleeping baby. And we've literally had customers who've said, like, with newborns, that when someone's on daddy duty and he has to keep an eye on the baby, he'll set his bike up literally right next to the crib, and maybe he's not doing the hardest workout, but he can actually spin away without waking up the baby, which is cool, knowing that something we said just as a joke for marketing is actually happening. So the noise aspect has really struck a chord with people.
Yeah, it's nice to see this sort of innovation, as it seems like every other trainer manufacturer is just trying to refine the same design they've been using for years. Do you think there's any reason no one else thought of this idea before, or?
It's hard to say. With a lot of these ideas, it's not something you necessarily set out to think about. Like, we didn't look at trainers and say, we can figure out a better way for this. It was just an idea that kind of came up and ended up being, okay, the right technology and the right application. So now, that being said, there are similar devices in the exercise industry. So when you look at spin bikes, for example, that have big aluminum flywheels, a lot of them actually use eddy current braking as well. The innovation of the leap for us was the use of your own rim instead of having a large aluminum flywheel. So because there's less aluminum, we required more magnets, but that's really the only major leap, was just reusing what the flywheel was. And one of the byproducts of that is, with an exercise bike, you have this massive flywheel built in, which helps with road feel. But one of the challenges that we had to overcome was, how do we get an adequate road feel without having that mass in your wheel, which is how we ended up with the wheel weights. And that actually has presented quite a surprising engineering challenge. You think it's just my cat walking through again.
Yeah.
That was quite an engineering challenge to come up with something that would fit within the wheel in a variety of spoke patterns, because, as you know, there's hundreds or thousands of different types of wheels out there and almost as many spoke patterns. And so we needed to fit as many as possible without damaging anything, and with providing a solution that was easy to use and safe. So we've gone through tons of iterations. We ended up buying a 3D printer fairly early on, but we've printed all these different prototypes that we would try jamming in the wheel and see, okay, does this work, or what's easy and what shape works? And it's incredible how much iteration it took to come up with something. And even these tiny little tweaks that we make here and there in the design can have big impacts depending on what your wheel actually looks like. So we have finally come up with this solution, which we're pretty happy with. And it took a long time to get there, and a lot of separate little innovations, but we have gotten somewhere that our customers seem to like, and it's a good compromise between the ability to install and the weight and the feel that it provides. And that was honestly one of the bigger challenges of the whole project in engineering it.
Yeah. I guess with VR coming out, do you see anything much more coming from this kind of trainer design technology-wise, or are you kind of hitting the peak there?
I'm tipping my hand a bit. Yes, we're working on a few new innovations, not necessarily specific to our resistance unit, but we do have some interesting trainer innovations that will significantly reduce the weight of the frame. And at the moment, I can't really go into it much more than that, but this is going to be our next, or one of our next major projects after the smart trainer is released. And yeah, we're calling it Smart Trainer, VR Trainer, Variable Resistance Trainer for now. We do have a name that we've decided on. We haven't officially announced it yet. So that will be coming out hopefully in the next week or so. We just want to check trademarks to make sure that we're not going to be stepping on anyone's toes. Yeah. But I believe that announcement, we ran a contest over Facebook, and that announcement will be made fairly shortly. Yeah, we do have other things coming along in the pipeline. It's kind of sticking with our trend or our strength, I guess, of doing things differently. It will be quite different, so we'll see how people react to it. It's a very non-traditional idea, but we believe there's a lot of potential to it. So I'm pretty excited for it, but I can't say too much more at this stage.
Okay, well, looking forward to that all then. Seems like some exciting times with the technology. I guess before moving on to talking about the virtual wind tunnel, just a little curious, what's your background then in endurance sport?
Sorry, say that again.
Your own background in cycling. I guess you mentioned you're a triathlete, so I guess endurance sports in general then.
So it was kind of interesting. Yeah, it was interesting how I ended up in triathlon. So I've always been kind of interested in endurance and running to some extent, but before actually getting brought into the sport by a friend who's now a business partner, Art, I, for whatever reason, I kind of gravitated towards just strength training and weightlifting. So I was at my highest weight and highest, I guess, muscle content just before starting in. So it was probably not the ideal place to start because I was over 200 pounds at that point. And it's a lot of weight to carry around if you're running. So after getting involved in it, I thought, oh, this is kind of fun. And then I started really getting focused on it. And I basically abandoned all the strength training, or most of the strength training that I was doing. So the weight continued to come off, and I guess over the next 3 years, I lost, 40 pounds, which makes you a much faster runner. I've noticed that things are harder to lift than they used to be, but that was kind of how I came into the sport. So it was almost starting from the opposite side of things that a lot of people do. So I had built up the muscle and needed to go backwards almost, or maybe not backwards, but just a lateral step and convert the muscle mass into all the fast twitch fibers into slow twitch fibers for endurance sports. So it was just competition with a friend that really got me involved in the sport. And as we started out, he was faster, significantly faster in everything, and especially swimming, because he had come from a competitive swimming background. And then as time went on, I started to catch up to him in both the bike and the run. Fortunately for me, he's not very aerodynamic, so even though he puts out a bit more power on the bike, he's a bit of a parachute by his own admission. We have done some races. I think there was a race last year, the Guelph Lake. We entered the Tri because it's a nice, quick race where you can really hammer for a short amount of time, but you're really pushing yourself to the limit. But I think he was 1 second faster on the bike, and I was 1 second faster on the run. And the entire difference of the race came down to the swim, and he had a minute and a half in the swim. So it was never actually that close. But had we started on the bike, it would have been very, very fun and very competitive. But over the past winter, I've been getting ready for an Ironman. I've signed up for the Mont Tremblant Ironman, and my swimming has really improved. So he has been busy programming our smart trainer, so he hasn't been swimming much. So it's going to be much closer this year. It'll be interesting to see once the race season rolls around where both of us sit. So I think it could be a fun year for that.
Hope you enjoyed the first part of my chat with Andrew from Stac. Look for part 2 coming shortly, where we talk about some of the other projects that Stac has on the go. including their virtual wind tunnel software, and I try to get Andrew to give us his tips on how to get more aerodynamic on the bike. If you enjoyed this video, please be kind enough to give it a thumbs up like, as well as subscribe to the channel for more great cycling content. Until next time, remember to fake it until you make it.